but I don't want the curated Lecrae. I don't want the media trained Lecrae. I want the Lecrae when it's just me and him in the studio. Yeah. It's late.
That's when the bitterness started to creep in. That's when you started hearing the like sidelines records where I'm like going at people and like talking. Y'all can call me and y'all ain't calling me. Y'all just talking about me crazy. The weed's passing around. Why not? You know, who cares? Man, that's dope, man. You smoking weed and your song Blessings. Like, I rock with that. And it's like, in my heart, I'm like.
Yeah, I just remember looking at that like, yo, this is not the fruit of the spirit. Who is your pastor? Like, this is crazy. And the accusations revved up against you. Yeah. But to be fair, was there ever a part where you felt like maybe you did kind of go a little too far into that? Kendrick and you like were friends.
Yeah. Kendrick Lamar shouted out Lecrae
and exchanged numbers and we're chopping it up. And I was like, okay, like he's really in this world now.
Ruslan.
All right, man, long overdue.
It's long overdue.
We're here.
For real.
In person.
Right.
We did something remote, virtual. I don't remember what year. I think it was during the pandemic, 2022.
Yeah, everybody was remote back then.
Yeah, but it's good to sit with you, man, in person. And congratulations on the success of the pod and everything you've been doing. It's cool to see you involved in this way.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know what success looks like exactly. I'm still new to it, so I'm like, I guess we're doing something right.
Yeah,
but, you know what I mean.
I feel like there's a version of Lecrae that when it's just you and me hanging out talking, the conversations are amazing. And I think to see that slowly coming out in the podcast is cool because I feel like for some amount of time you were very careful and delicate with how you would carry yourself. And I'd always be like, nah, like, but I don't want the curated Lecrae. I don't want the media trained Lecrae, the publicist Lecrae. I want the Lecrae when it's just me and him in the studio. It's late, he's tired, and he's just letting it fly. And not that you would say anything crazy or cussing or anything like that.
Just more.
There's just like a unfiltered version that hopefully the world will get to see a bit more in this conversation.
I had to go to therapy, man. I had to go to therapy, you know, so worried about what everybody thought.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that people preach the loudest is what they're struggling with. So you hear me preaching, if you live for their acceptance, you die for their rejection all the time. And it's like, because I was always so worried about what everyone had to say and like how it would affect me. And so I think you're just seeing a more comfortable version of me now.
Yeah, I mean, and there's been quite a bit of criticism hurled at you for decades. You've been doing this for a long time. So and I want to kind of come to some of that and all the obvious stuff that people have said. But some people may not know all of your background. I know that you've traveled around a lot. We're from the same county, San Diego. And then but some folks don't know how early you were really into this thing. Before there was money in it, before there was Reach Records offices, before there was platinum gold plaques on the wall. I'm walking around, I'm seeing plaques everywhere, right? We met in 2008 or 2009 through our mutual friend show Baraka. But you were already moving for years. You were already putting out stuff. And so tell a bit about like the genesis of what it was for you to get into this music thing and what those early days were like. Because people could pull up like the reverse rap battle on YouTube and like you at these camps. But you were doing this stuff before there was any hope of a quote unquote career or money in this thing. Tell me about those like early humble days.
It wasn't sexy at all. I remember, so I became a Christian at the University of North Texas. Well, not at the school, but Impact Movement. Impact had a conference. I on the way to the conference, and this is like late 90s, like 98, 99. On the way to the conference, everyone is bumping this CD called Heaven's Mentality by Cross Movement. And I'm like, this is trash. I was like, I hate this. Why are we listening to this? Get to the conference, and they're performing. But I had never seen, I wasn't a believer at this time. So I just went because it was like Atlanta. I had never seen like culturally relevant Christians, like Christians that just look like me, dressed like how we're, I think I had this thing in my brain that Christians wore suits and ties and like, you know what I mean? So when I saw Cross Movement come out on stage and they started performing the album that they were about to drop, it was more relevant, and I was like, oh, this is dope.
What year was this?
This is 99.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, this is dope. And end up getting saved. And I already had a prototype from them, kind of like, oh, you can be your normal self and then rap about your faith transition. So I didn't think I want to be famous or anything. I just thought I'm going to change the way that I rap now and try to impact my local community or whatever. So I was just making songs on campus because we had a campus ministry, and I was just making songs for them. And so the first record that I released, or I crafted in this new, well, not the first record, but the first record that I did like in a studio was this record called The Line, and it was for Plum Line, which was our campus ministry. So that when you hear me and Tadashi, you rolling with The Line, this is 04. That was aimed at just this group of like 100 people.
You're trying to serve the people right in front of you.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then Take Me As I Am, which I did like same time period. I wrote that for a bunch of boys in the juvenile detention center. Because I was like, I wanted them to hear, like, I know what you're struggling with. And I was a volunteer at the Juvenile Detention Center. So there was no sense of like, let's blow this thing up. It was really just like mission work. That's kind of the way the mindset it was. It was just like, and then it grew from there.
Well, and it was also explicitly, I don't know how else to call it, but like explicitly ministry rap.
Oh, yeah.
It was explicitly ministry rap. It was rich in theology.
Yeah.
And it was... Yeah, it was culturally relevant enough in the sense that it was hip hop, but it was also like overtly Christian, and that makes sense to know that you were doing it for a specific local context.
Right.
The record. So I remember meeting the Cross Movement in 2002. The night that I gave my like public declaration of faith to Jesus was at a Miles Ahead crusade.
Shout out to Miles.
And they performed at it. Yeah, shout out to Miles. He's great. They performed at it, and I gave my public declaration of faith there. And then I ended up meeting them afterwards. And they had, at that time, what they want to say it was called the Human Emergency Project.
Human Emergency.
And I thought that was fire. Like I was like, oh, this is dope.
Yeah.
I still didn't quite understand why the music always had to be so explicitly Christian. Like I think that was kind of the tension that we were wrestling with.
Yeah.
And then I kind of get immersed in this whole world. And then I remember you had a record out with them, the second record. It was right. It was a second record.
After the music stops.
After the music stops. So that was what, like 05, 06?
05, 06, yep.
05, 06. And I remember that making waves and just kind of like, now your name's kind of bubbling. Everyone's talking about you in a Christian space.
Yeah.
But the moment that I was like, oh, like this is going to be big. I knew this was going to be big. I want to say it was in 2007. We were the Breaks back then. We were traveling.
Yeah.
And we did some random like youth group in Hershey, Pennsylvania, because we booked a college show. So like the college show covered us to go do the church show. That's how our world worked, right? Because we didn't get booked at church shows. And then they're like, yo, come to Epiphany in Philly.
Oh.
And we're doing this big street outreach.
Yep.
And like Swift is there and the Cross Movement dudes are there.
Corner to the Classroom, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And this is like a week or so before Rebel comes out.
Yep.
And I remember seeing you perform at that.
Yep.
And around the same time, like album comes out and it's like 30,000 first week or something. It was like a crazy number. And I was like, oh, this is the biggest thing that I ever remember from a Christian hip hop artist.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is now potentially starting to cut through just because the numbers are so huge.
Yeah.
What was your recollection of that season? And then we hadn't met yet. I just saw you perform there. I think I had like talked to the Cross Movement dudes. I was with Swift and Fish was around and everyone. What was your recollection of that season? Because now it's starting to like bubble. Now there's numbers.
Yeah. I think how deep we gonna get? I'll keep it 100. That was a weird time because I felt like little brother, you know, to like all the Cross Movement giants, right? And I would go on tours. I went on a tour with them, and it was like there was this hierarchy that existed. You know what I'm saying? And for me, I didn't care. because I wasn't trying to be the man. I really didn't want to be the man. I never liked that. I wanted to be a part of something, because I didn't grow up in a functional family. My family was super dysfunctional. So I just wanted to be a part of a family. I didn't want to be leader at all. And Show got pissed at me one time and he was like, yo, be a leader, bro. Like, just be the leader, you know? And I was like, I don't want to be. I just want us to be a family. So Rebel was kind of putting me in this position, like, as leader, you know what I mean? And I didn't like that. And, you know, at the time, The Truth was like the guy. And then he had his, you know, public failure, you know what I mean? And so it's like no one's paying attention to him. And so it was like Ambassador's like the guy, but he's a little older, and it's like people are checking for him, but then he has his public failure, and then it's like all eyes on me. And I was like, yo, I don't like this. So I really didn't like that season when everything was popping off, because I didn't want to be the guy. I was like, I'm not as theologically in depth as they are. They went to seminary and all this stuff. And I thought that to be a Christian rapper, you had to like give a dissertation in your lyrics. And I was finally coming into my own where I was like, that's not how I'm wired. Like, I did a song on that album called The Bride, and I studied for like a week to write that song. And it was so painful to me. Whereas Don't Waste Your Life, I was sitting in at Plaza Bonita parking lot, and I wrote that in like 30 minutes because it just came out. It wasn't a didactic teaching lesson. So I was comfortable being a guy that didn't have to teach, just rap what was in my heart because I was reading and it came out. I didn't like everything bubbling, and then I had to be the guy. So I didn't know like success, what that looked like, because everything was success to me. It was like, shoot, every step we took was better than the last one. So I was like, man, I've already surpassed my expectations.
Yeah. I think seeing that about you early on made sense on why you didn't have the massive explosion that you did later. Because it's like, if there's anyone the Lord would want to be platformed and the way God breathed on things later on, like, it would be someone that's like, I don't really want to be famous. Like, this ain't it. Like, I started doing this as a way to just serve the people in front of me. Yeah. But that's the heart, right? Humility precedes honor. It was in that heart that I think God promotes you to be this face. And the interesting thing is that, and this is going to sound weird, but there's always like, hierarchies exist. That they are what they are. Power vacuums exist. And so if there isn't a face to a movement, that will be a void, and someone will have to be the face of something, right? So that isn't. I don't think it's necessarily good or bad. It just is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
God uses our kind of cultural realities.
Yeah, and it's the children of Israel saying, like, we want a king. Yeah, you know, and then they get Saul, but then they get David, and then but David's not perfect. Right. You know what I mean? And so I think in the space of music and entertainment and media, I think people naturally default to like, well, who's the guy now? You know, and that's what you became in that season. Yeah. And around the same time, you guys did like a thing with Cross Movement for that after the music stops. But then now Reach is launching around the same window. Show Baraka, Tripoli, Tadashi. And it was the four of you guys. 116 Unashamed. The lyrics were very intense. I remember hearing, "Lord, kill me if I don't preach the gospel." And I was like, whoa, like this is intense. And at the same time, I'm coming out of the Tunnel Rats era because I'm close to Future Shock. And so me and Show connect, and then we're all connecting, and we're like having these like in-house conversations of like, well, does it have to be explicitly preachy? And can you rap about rapping and just fun stuff? And so like me, Show, and Official, I remember many late nights like driving and talking and like having these in-house kind of conversations. And then as Reach is blossoming, there's more success. There's more success. And I don't mean to like fast forward along this timeline, but is there anything that we're missing in this window as like 2007 to 2012-ish?
Only what I would say is that I give so much credit to Cross Movement. I think they were phenomenal. I would not be here were it not for them. However, seeing their human frailty made me question some of the demands they put on how music should be made, because they were the ones that were kind of influencing us to say, if it's not like this, you shouldn't do it.
Was that ever overtly said?
Yeah.
Okay. That was overtly said.
It was overtly said. Like, why would you not want to use music to preach the gospel? Why would you do anything else with it? You know what I mean? And it was like, oh, yeah, that's good. I shouldn't do anything other than preach the gospel.
Every song has to be a little mini sermon.
That's it.
Yeah.
Why else would you not? Like, his name is ambassador because God's using us as ambassadors. Like, what are we doing if we're not doing that? And so I think as I saw some of their humanity, I said, wait a minute, y'all don't have this all figured out. And there's room for nuance and variation. And I started reading other books, you know, and so that, because I caught a lot of backlash. Like 2011 is the Rehab album, and I wrote a song called Background. Doesn't mention God at all. So I can play the background. You take the lead. It's you. That's it. Caught backlash from that camp. You know what I mean? From some folks. And it was like, yo, man, what's the thought behind this? And it was like, bro, I'm just not going to follow these rules.
That's crazy that Background was the song that caught you backlash.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great record.
I mean, yeah.
That's almost like a worship record.
I know.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh, this is fire. Like, I never thought, oh, he doesn't say Jesus in this record.
Yeah, bro.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because that was the introduction of Andy as well.
Yeah.
Like on a kind of a mainstream, or not a mainstream, like a public Christian stage.
Right.
He's on that record. Wow. That is so yeah. Okay. So there's these rules, and we always knew that y'all had rules, but no one would ever verify or confirm this was official.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And so we were kind of on the other end of the spectrum where like the majority of the little bit of money we were making was coming from colleges. Yeah. And that's all, like, because we couldn't get booked at churches because everyone was like, well, why don't you say Jesus in every song, like Cross Movement and Lamp Mode and Reach? And we're like, all right, well, I guess we're not going to work in this world because we don't talk about Jesus enough. Right. So we figured it out doing like the NACA college circuit, which I've kind of given you the background in that. Yeah. And so, okay, so that makes sense. So now there's like this convergence of like, you can't say these things, but you're like, I'm going to do my own thing. And the humanity of yes, both, you know, Ambassador and The Truth having their moment, which people can go research that on their own. Yeah. You're like, okay, well, maybe there's different ways to do stuff. Right. And so is that the shift leading into church close? Because that's when you really started catching the backlash.
Oh, man. Okay. That was rough.
Okay.
That was I got flack in my own camp. So there was folks at Reach who were like, I don't think this is a God idea. You know what I mean? And it was like, so I've been reading this book called Total Truth by Nancy Pearcey, you know, and you look at Francis Schaeffer, Chuck Colson, like they were more like Labrie, like influencing culture with Christianity and what are the narratives that culture's bringing forth. Creation Regained was another book that was very influential for me. And so it was this other view that I was getting. And I would say like Tim Keller would be the contemporary of a lot of those, that mind state of like, hey, what if you can listen to their stories and engage them and then talk to them about what they have going on and then show them an alternative perspective. And I was like, yo,
that's fire.
I want to do that. Yeah. You know? And so I'm talking with my guy AT about it. He's like, you definitely should do that. But then I got a call from some of my buddies in St. Louis and they were like, dog, don't do this. Like you tripping, bro. And I'm like, I don't think I'm tripping. Like I think God, and it's because I let them listen to some of the songs on Church Close before I put them out. And it was like, nah, bro. You know, so I was like, nah, I think if we can tell their story and then show them an alternative perspective. And that was the impetus of the song Church Close. It was like, let me speak from the perspective of somebody who hates church, sees the hypocrisy, but then flip it at the end to say, but wait a minute, I'm a hypocrite as well. And I need Jesus. And that was the thought. And it didn't go over well in that camp, but God breathed on it. You know what I mean? I had to give dissertation after dissertation after dissertation as to what I was reading, what I was learning. This wasn't just an attempt to be more mainstream. It wasn't like, I want to be famous. It was like, this is a mission field. Not to say I didn't have my struggles down the line. For sure I did. But the idea was to infiltrate culture and not like just come in with the jackhammer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got it. I saw it and I was like, oh, this is fire. Like, this is great in terms of what was happening with church clothes. I remember you guys had us open the Reach Life Institute. It was Jason, The Breaks, Francis, Shan.
Yeah.
Us. Well, I already said The Breaks. You closed it out. And I remember I think you may have debuted church clothes that day live.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that was a fun event. That was jam packed.
Man, it was crazy.
It was crazy. So I got it. I was like, this is great. I was also thinking like, man, maybe Lecrae making this subtle shift will like soften people to what we were trying to do because they just didn't get it. Like you guys, I had us out at Man Up Conference as well. There's a lot of looks you guys gave us that like it was like, man, these are great looks, but the audience just didn't get it. Like it was just like,
they wanted that didactic.
Yeah.
Like, where is the scripture?
Yes. What an interesting part is that this has also been throughout church history. Like there's always been creators that have just made beautiful art or stories or narratives that were clearly from their Christian worldview. So, I mean, just within recent history, you got J.R.R. Tolkien with Lord of the Rings. You got C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. And they're both different in that folks don't know how devoted J.R.R. Tolkien was to Jesus, but C.S. Lewis did Chronicles of Narnia, and then he went on to be an apologetic voice. So there's always been, in my opinion, room for both. You know, there's quotes from Martin Luther saying like the best thing that, you know, a Christian, I think it was a Christian shoemaker can do is make the best shoes. They don't got to talk about Jesus in the shoes. You know what I mean? So there's always been these like points of like everything doesn't have to be. But let me ask you this: how much of this was driven by the Reformed Calvinistic theology that kind of swept Christendom, or at least in our Protestant circles, where, what would you say, 2006 onward was like a heavy Calvinist phase that we were all kind of, you know, succumb to. And then it would be like, well, how Calvinist are you?
Oh my
you know?
gosh.
And I remember asking him, a mutual friend of ours, I remember asking him, because I was like, man, I like, you know, the 4 points. I don't know about this limited atonement. Jesus only died for the pre-elect. And I remember asking a mutual friend of ours, who I am not going to say his name, I'll tell you afterwards. I said, how are you a 5-point Calvinist? He said, I'm a 1,000-point Calvinist. And I was like, he was like at like Legacy Conference or something. It's Paul Washer. How much of that do you think is this, where it's like, is the gospel, obviously there's words and we have to preach it, but not only is there words, there's like, it almost became like you got to say this sequence of words in a specific way. And if you don't say substitutionary atonement and you don't say justification, then it's almost like you said abracadabra wrong. Like it almost felt like that. And I'm not trying to minimize and generalize all Calvinists as this. This is just my experience with the folks I was around. How much of that do you think was driving some of this worldview of like, you got to be explicit with these things, and if you're not, then we're looking at you sus?
I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself. I know for me, growing up in a dysfunctional family, you know, my pops left, my mom is struggling. I don't know what it means to be embraced, other than my gang member uncle, you know what I mean? Like, to be embraced by a man and be affirmed. So when I get embraced by older men who are saying, you're doing a good job, son, those first older men who did that were reformed guys, right? And now I'm starting to look up to the people they look up to, who are the John Pipers of the world and, you know, all of these folks. And so I want to be on the straight and narrow with them, because in my mind, that's dad, you know? Sounds so crazy when I say that out loud. Ugh. But I'm just like, I want daddy to approve of me. And I got to make sure my what I say impresses him. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm writing in such a way to where, is this impressive? And I remember sitting down with Francis Chan one time, and Francis was like, hey, can I pick your brain? And I was like, what do you mean pick my brain? And he had a bunch of questions for me. Like he was trying to get wisdom from me. And I was like, you think I have something to offer? And I think that was a light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, none of these people have it figured out. Like, I can like be a leader too. Like I can have something to offer. And it was like, oh shoot. And I had to like recalibrate my brain to get out of that mindset. I do feel like there were a lot of reformed rappers who were they were Pharisees. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, nah, why y'all eating on the Sabbath? You know what I'm saying? Why your rhyme don't have this in it? And I got beat up by them, you know, and the most disappointing part of that was a lot of them had my number. They had my phone number. They did not call me. They made diss songs. They made public rebukes. And I was like, yo, what is this? Because I just wasn't raised that way. I was raised to like, yo, we got an issue. Let's talk about it. What's going on? You know what I mean? And I was like, bro, it just all started to, that's when the bitterness started to creep in. That's when you started hearing the like Sidelines records where I'm like going at people and like talking, because I was like, yo, this is, y'all can call me and y'all ain't calling me. Y'all just talking about me crazy. And yeah, that's when so I do feel like I would have listened if they would have came at me, you know, like hey, Trip Lee is coming at me a million times and, you know, hey man, I don't know about this. What about this? What if we change that? What is this? My brother, I respect it. All right, we can discourse on it. Either we can disagree or I change it. But I just felt like, man, it was a camp who just was like, I'm not. You will be rebuked.
Well, and these same folks were initially folks you were affiliated with. Yeah. Loosely. Maybe not, I don't know if y'all did records together, but
no, we've done records together.
You've done records together.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is now post church close.
Yeah.
And you're starting to get some notoriety, starting to get some visibility. I remember we were at South by Southwest together and we watched a Kendrick panel, which was very interesting because Kendrick's like super mysterious now and he's never on social media. Do you remember what that panel was about?
I don't even remember.
It was about leveraging social media.
Wow.
Do you remember what he talked about?
I have no idea.
He talked about sharing his personality on Twitter by talking about his favorite cereals.
Yo, your memory's crazy.
Bro, so I just remember thinking like, first, because I had heard Kendrick's music at that point, but I didn't know what he looked like.
Yeah.
Because I had heard Ignorance is Bliss and I'd heard these different things and I was like, oh, it was clearly he was like the next one up from the West Coast. This might be 2011. This is definitely before Good Kid, Mad City.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there listening to, it's like, oh, he's rather profound in his leveraging of social media to get his messaging out. And it's so interesting. Side note, how interesting it was that Kendrick was giving advice on how artists should use social media to get the word out. Right. Crazy. And I remember I asked the question about like how did they go from scaling locally to regionally to globally.
You would have a question.
Yeah, I did because they were talking about being at the Compton Swap Meet selling their CDs and getting the word out that way. Right, the days of CDs and mixtapes. Right, and so I remember that moment, and I remember right after that panel we came out and like. Kendrick and you like were friends and exchanged numbers and we're chopping it up. And I was like, okay, like he's really in this world now and there's a connection that's happening and it only just kept scaling and scaling. I think Kendrick was in that church close video, wasn't he? There was like a drop from him in the very beginning. And I started like, oh wow, this is awesome. Like I was like, this is great. Like this is amazing to see that. Now, fast forward, when do things become so big where you're like, oh, like, where's that next pop? Where's that next, like, was it the record Anomaly where you're doing, was that 75,000 first week? Which is, those are incredible numbers back then. Yeah. Those are good numbers now, but back then it was like, whoa, it's the #1 rap record in the country. It's 2015-ish.
Yeah.
Do you remember a point where you were like, okay, like, things are a bit different now?
Yeah. I think it started to feel that way because Gravity was the number 3 album in the country. Number 3 was
That's
crazy.
right, yeah. Gravity was big. I remember that, yeah.
Gravity was number 3. And the things we had accumulated, like we got a feature from Big Crit on Gravity, and it was like, oh shoot, we got a Big Crit agreed to do it, which is a whole nother sidebar. He's so scarred from doing that record because he was assaulted by Christians. But that was when it was like, okay, this is kind of crazy. And then, you know, making the trips to LA, being in circles when I had Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne's managers trying to sign me, it was like,
you talking about Tez?
Tez, but also Al Branch and them, like they were like, yo, man, we want to let's just talk about doing a deal with you. And it was like, okay, y'all want to sign me to be on your, you know, so it was like stuff started getting a little murky and strange. And the good part was like the inroads that were being made, right? Like a lot of new opportunities. The bad part was, I think Satan used those wounds that I had of not feeling secure, not having a family, to really like create this narrative in my mind that I needed to find a tribe. And so I was now like bitter toward the people who had first embraced me. And I was like, and some of it might have been their jealousy. You know, some people have admitted they were jealous in the past. But then it was like, I kept getting like hit up from folks like, why you ain't put me on, or why I'm not in this, and why you didn't do that.
People overtly asked you why you ain't put me on? Wow.
Oh, yes. Big time.
Wow.
Like, yo, why you ain't put me on? Like, you ain't my real friend if you didn't repost my joint. Like, you ain't give me no feature, bro. Like, we family. Why you ain't...
Well, I like the record to show that I did get a feature in that window. I had to finesse it. Do you remember this feature moment?
Was that the song with JR?
No, that was early. That was 2011. So
Okay,
you did me a solid. Then you showed up in a music video. Like that was really cool of you. I think didn't we record your verse in Southeast
garage?
In a garage. That was shout out to David's Harp Foundation. They ended up becoming a really dope nonprofit.
That's dope.
But I'm talking after that, we did a record that may have gone on church clothes. It didn't make church clothes. And then Joseph P. got me the vocals, but you had used a couple of the bars, and I had to like finagle it and like kind of I like made it sound like me and you was going back and forth.
That's right.
And you guys cleared the record. And this is like 2013. This stuff is really starting to pop off. And I remember like, man, I don't know if they gonna let me get this record off, you know? And but I got Joseph did that, and then it came out, and then everything was. I think it even did decent at like Christian radio or something like that.
Well, what's interesting about that is that was a time period for me where I needed y'all, I needed prop, I needed people who, cause people would ask me, yo, who's dope out here? And there was a little bit of shame of like the quality of Christian rap for me.
Back then. Back then.
And so I was like, I only want to tell them about people that are lyrically dope. You know what I mean? Because the standard at that point in time was not how good your rapping was or how dope your music was. It was like, does it minister? You know what I mean? And so it's like, hey, is this preaching, like, is it a sermon? Yeah.
And the music could be good, but it was so on the nose.
Right.
Theologically, that it wouldn't, that like if your ears aren't attuned to understanding what we're talking about, it's instantly gonna turn people off. And at the same time in hip hop, you have, this is the explosion of Kendrick, Cole, and Drake. This is the quote unquote big three. There's a shift happening where music is coming out of the 2000s and into the 2010s, and in rap matters, substance matters, lyricism matters, cadences matters now, because the big three rappers are
rapping.
Rapping. Yeah. That's helpful. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, so I needed y'all. So I would have done anything for y'all at that, especially at that time period. It was like, because
I would have asked for more favors had I known that.
Because I was like,
why'd you put me on?
I needed to feel like I wasn't alone. I needed to feel like, nah, we a movement. It's a Wu-Tang behind me. You know what I mean? And so it was like, that's probably why you would hear me highlight Andy so much during that time, because we were kind of on the same wavelength, like same type of thought process. And I was like, yo, I'm not on this super didactic, beat people over the head type of vibes right now. And again, I don't know I've never been here before. Mm-hmm. I've never been, like, I'm on Sway. I've never been on Sway. Jimmy, I don't know.
Yeah, I remember late night looks and all that.
Yeah, I'm crazy. Like, this is new to me. And people are like, yo, why didn't you say this? Or why didn't you do this? And I'm like, bro, I have never been here before. Mm-hmm. I don't know what this, I am, the most nervous I've ever been is being on Jimmy Fallon. Mm-hmm. I've never been more nervous. I'm like, this is live. If I get this wrong, what do I say? These people are thinking, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? What is my audience thinking? What is my fan base thinking? What is this? All these things running through my head as a human. And that's when the environment just shifted. And it's like, yo, this is another planet. And I'm trying to adjust in real time. Yeah. And there's so many expectations on me, just like,
let me ask you this, and I don't mean to poke in this regard, ahead. But was there a moment where Show Baraka kind of doing the pivot right before you?
Yeah.
Was there a moment, because you guys have reconciled and all that stuff, but was there a moment where like, oh man, I wish Show was around and here for all of this, because at least that's someone that's familiar, but that got where you were going?
Yeah. So the funny thing about it is, when Show started, the show made We Could Be More way early, which is a song about
a great record, by the way.
Great record. Yeah. Song about his love for his wife. Yep. We were like, yo, this is not about Jesus. He was like, I know. And God approves. Song of Solomon, whatever. We went to war over that. But then we conceded, the song came out. Show would bust my head. He would just come at me like, you ain't, what is this? What's that? What's this? And I would always come back and he was just like, dog, you are bugging. And I'm thinking, man, this poor brother, he just doesn't see it, you know? And he left me a book. I can't remember the name of the book now, but I gave it to Tori Kelly years later, but it was basically on arts. It's like a Christian view of the arts. And I was like, man, just to love him, I'm going to read it. And it started rocking me. And he says some things that really rocked me. And that was kind of our like, goodbye. You know what I mean? And I was just like, he was like, yo, I'm going to leave you with this and I'm out. And so.
And he went on to do like Talented 10th,
all those particular things, you know. And he planted a seed, you know, to help me see that my faith is broader than what I understood it to be. It just, took a while for that seed to grow. And me and Tripp always go back and give him so much praise now. We're like, yo, bro, we didn't get it, bro. But you were the first to take all the bullets for us.
He was. And so do you think you would have potentially been a bit more anchored had he still been around, proximity wise, or maybe even going to some of these events or touring with you, right? Because when y'all toured earlier, like there was a brotherhood you guys had like, do you think if he was still in the mix at the peak of all this stuff of the 2014, 2015, 2016 era,
it would have been better?
Yeah.
Only reason why I say probably not is because Show is a disruptor. So if it's working for me, that means it's too safe for him. Okay. So he's going to be like, oh, well, we're going here then. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think, you know, he just would have been like, nah, we got to, like, this is, nah. If you're doing that, I'm doing this. He's not a conformist, so to speak. So it probably still would have been some issues. But all that to say, I owe him a lot for him planting those seeds and putting me in the place that I am today.
Yeah, shout out Show Baraka, man. That's my guy. So 2014, 2015, things are really popping off. Late night TV.
Yeah.
You know, Gravity's doing well. Anomaly, #1 rap record.
Right.
You're on Hot 97. When do you start struggling? When is the because I think the interesting part is like historically, like I believe God positions Christians to impact culture. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a net positive thing.
Yeah.
I think that we should be the head and not the tail. I think we should be doing these things to impact culture for the better. At the same time, whenever Christians get power and influence, seldom is it well in the grand scheme of church history, right? And it took the church a while. I mean, probably hundreds of years before they kind of found their footing, and then you got literacy rates going up. Then you got the colleges and institutions is being built. Then you got medicine and innovation in science, and like a majority of our Western world, even secularism and the Enlightenment, that was like all thoughts out of the church. You know, but it took a while for the church to kind of to find their footing, where it was like, okay, the church is going to actually be the beacon of light for the world, right? And you're now successful, and so was it kind of like a similar, like, okay, now there's probably more money, more status, more influence. You have some of this resentment and bitterness, and now you go through a season of struggle. You go through a season. I think you feel comfortable using the word deconstruction. What was that like, and is that a fair assessment from my standpoint?
Yeah, it was a firestorm, man, and I think, you know, when the Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, and, you know, darkness in other realms, I don't think I took that very serious. You know what I mean? I think I just saw flesh and blood in front of me, and I was like, I'll just avoid the flesh and blood, or I'll figure out how to defeat the flesh and blood, and I'll be good. And I think what happened was it's a cocktail. I got this bitterness from being constant, like the constant drip of Christians saying things about me.
The most vile things, by the way. I remember looking at your comment section, and it went from, hey, we don't get it, to like wolf, heretic, false teacher, crazy. I just remember looking at that like, yo, this is not the fruit of the Spirit. Who is your pastor? Like, this is crazy. Were you looking at the comments back then?
Yes, because we didn't have any. There was no social media etiquette for mental health or anything. It was all new. So you just read, respond. Like, there was no like, hey, this is not a good idea to consume this. And I didn't know the effect it would have on my mental or spiritual health by reading that every day. Every day I'm reading people say, I am the worst human being on the planet. Avoid me at all costs. And I'm like, yo, you don't even know me. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, this, and then you start reading about stuff that's not even a reality. Like, it's like, yeah, he doesn't even go to church. Matter of fact, he was practicing witchcraft over here. And I'm like, when did this happen? I don't even know I did this.
Yeah, I've always known you to be a local church guy. I've always known you to be plugged into a church, usually leading some type of home group or something, and doing life with people. So that was weird to me, because I was like, I think I'm pretty sure Lecrae is in church and he's faithful.
Bro, true story. I am leading a small group at my church. And I get this guy who tweets at me crazy stuff. You're a heretic. You're a wolf in sheep's clothing. I notice he's in Atlanta. I said, hey, my brother, would you like to come to my church and have a conversation about some of the things that you're saying? I'm just calling him out on what he says. He's like, for sure. So he comes to my church. Him and his wife are bawling because the sermon impacts them so much. He's like, yo, man, maybe I was wrong, because this church is amazing, right? So they end up joining the church. Unbeknownst to me, he gets put in my small group. Now, he doesn't know it's my small group. I don't know he's coming to my small group. I haven't seen him since that kind of interaction. You know what I mean? And I'm in the garage working on my car, and I hear my wife saying, oh yeah, my husband's out here, just come on through. And I come from under the car and I see it's him. I'm like, yo, what you doing? He's like, oh, I'm in the small group. You lead us? I said, yeah, this is a small group. So now he's in my home. We're the same build, same size. He just moved out here from Cali. I'm like, yo, man, you know, I know you're getting your foot together. I go in my closet. I say, yo, take all of this because I got it from photo shoots, blah, blah, blah. I know y'all just moved out here. Take all of this stuff,
Lace him up.
Yeah, wow, you got it. This man writes a letter and puts it in my mailbox saying, I'm even more convinced you're a wolf. I see you trying to lure me with your gifts and your hospitality. And I want nothing to do with you.
Oh, man.
And I was like, yo, this is craziness.
Wow.
And now he knows where I live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was the level of chaos. We had to move to a gated community because we had a couple more instances where people I'm welcoming people into my home and it started to get chaotic. A person joined the church one time and demanded to be in my small group. And it was like, nah, it doesn't work like that. He just shows up at my house beating on the door.
Whoa.
You know what I'm saying? And my wife is there by herself. And he's like, yo,
man.
I know y'all trying to trick me. I belong in this small group. This is where God told me to be.
Whoa.
So it's like, all right, we're moving. You know what I'm saying? We got to move.
I mean, at least y'all got guns in Georgia.
Yeah, facts.
That's crazy, man. That because I was going to ask you in more of just like a personal, like that line of you're meeting people at church and it's weird because you don't know who knows you.
Yeah.
And that parasocial relationship.
Oh, man.
But you don't want to presume that people know who you are, or what you do. So it's this weird, like, do they know what, you know? And then you're trying to do life with people and be normal, but at the same time, you don't know who's there because or even with malicious motives, right? So it's a delicate balance because I'm similar to where I'm just available. I'm at church. I just taught this past Sunday. I am a part of the young adults ministry. My wife leads the children's choir. Oof. You know what I mean? And so like we're just out. But I never want to be the guy that just assumes everyone knows who I am. So I just be super like, come on over for dinner. Like, let's do life, you know? And so there's those like questions if you don't know. So I think like you've gone through it and have had to navigate this like balance of how do I remain a normal
human being,
that's accessible, that's here to serve people, while at the same time understanding your life is different. It's it's unique.
It's crazy, man. So I'm saying to your original question, it's like that's what started to create the slow drip of my like deconstruction period. Is because my interactions with, you know, Christians it was like the best way to put it is like I would say like you take a glass of water, you put a paper towel on top of it, and you just start putting drops of water on that thing. Eventually, it's going to bust. So it's just a constant drip over the years. I remember, you know, when they started going crazy on me for like church clothes content, I sat in my closet and I just cried, and I was like, God, what am I doing wrong? Like, I feel like I'm trying to serve you. And the Lord was like, oh no, they hated me too. You know, like keep going. And I was like, all right, Lord. So I keep going. But then it got to the point where now I'm in this cocktail. I'm bitter. I'm frustrated. They're blasting me. So I'm like, y'all want me to be all of this stuff, you know? And it was like, you want me to mess up. I was like, I'm not listening to y'all no more. So I'm carrying this bitterness. And then I got trauma that hasn't been addressed from just growing up. I've never seen a therapist at this point in time. Now I've got fame and acclaim, and I don't know how to, I have no one who's been there. I don't have a mentor or anybody who can say, okay, so this is what you want to process here. This is what you want to think about here. Because all of those mentors that I would have saw as helpful now were like the people that were the judgmental group. So I'm like, I don't know who to talk to about this new space that I'm in. And man, I think Satan just went to town. And so I think the moment of like unraveling, I'll never forget, was kind of like, I was trying to figure out what strain of Christian am I? You know what I mean? If I'm not Reformed or I'm not Pentecostal or I'm not, like, who am I? What do I believe? So I am sitting in, I'm opening for Jill Scott on this little mini tour, and I'm backstage, and an Orthodox priest comes backstage after I had been praying, right? And he comes backstage, cracks open a can of beer, and he's like, hey man, what's going on, bro? And he starts talking to me. He's like, I love what you do, da 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 da. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna check out Orthodoxy. So I go down the Orthodoxy road, and I'm like, this doesn't feel like I don't know if this is it. And I was like, God, right now, I quit because I don't know what is up and what's down. And I had a dream that night. And in my dream, I heard if it was like a voice saying, don't give up on me. Don't give up on me. But I was like, I don't know who or where you are. And this is it shouldn't take all of this. And I couldn't find a voice that was saying something helpful to me. I just kept hearing voices that had something to say. And then right as I'm in this place of like, God, where are you? I don't know which one you are. Unarmed Black people start getting killed. I speak out about it. As I speak out about it, of course, I got this bigger platform now. A lot of the folks that I would have probably listened to historically, but I was struggling with, were saying like negative things. I was getting pastors who were associated with churches that I looked up to, sending me messages telling me that I have lost my way. You know what I mean? And now you're being political. And man, that's when I was just done. That's when I was just like,
this is like 2016-ish.
Yeah, 2016.
That's a hard time, man.
I'm done.
Yeah, because I think the expectation was, if people are naturally in a state of depravity or original sin, why would you assume that people who have authority and power over other people are incapable of abusing said power?
Absolutely.
Right. And I think what happened, and I don't know if this happened in 2016 or later, is I think there were sensible things being said that everyone should yes and amen.
Sure.
For example, police shouldn't have unchecked power to brutalize and assault people.
Sure.
Specifically Black people.
Sure.
However, this happens to white people, because there was videos that it happened to white people. And I think that was a sensible thing to say and a reasonable thing to say. And then how that was interpreted is like, all police officers are racist.
Yes.
All police officers are bad.
Yes.
And to be fair to folks on the other side, this is the rise of the Black Lives Matter organization.
Yes.
And I remember having a conversation with Sho, and Sho gets mad whenever I say this, but I remember he told me in 2015, like, man, I don't want nothing to do with those folks.
Yeah.
Those folks are a bunch of,
you
know, and he used all the words.
Yep.
So I'm not, we're going to not say exactly what he said.
We know what
but he said all the things about those women that were leading that organization. So I was already kind of like hip to like, oh yeah, nah, that's off, you know? But there was ideas backdoored, specifically them saying they were trained Marxists, specifically things that I would say, there's a difference between saying, hey, laws from decades ago impact people's realities today. And even though we've came a long way as a country, there's still people living in impoverished neighborhoods, and it's still complicated and it still hurts. That was taken, and then there was, in my opinion, you could disagree if you want, but there was people that, in my opinion, were opportunistic that stepped in and took a very sensible thing. People shouldn't be brutalized by police. Black people tend to come in contact more. This shouldn't happen. This is bad. To D'Angelo, white fragility, Kim D, the only way to fix past discrimination is with current discrimination and future discrimination. And these now, like, those people, in my opinion, are poison. Like, that's straight poison. And I feel like you weren't on that. No. From what I heard from you, it was more of a, hey, this is bad. And I'm Black. And I've had negative encounters with police. And I'm someone that, like, I've seen my Black friends be mistreated by police. I've said this publicly, but I've gone to 8 funerals in my lifetime. 2 of them were of unarmed Black men killed by police. Now we can get into the minutia and the details of what happened there and was that justified or not. But so, like, I understood it and I got it. And so that's what I gathered was it was this tension of, hey, this is sensible to say. Police shouldn't be mistreating people. Right. Packaged with a movement that backdoored all kinds of other poisonous ideology. And now you say one thing, hey, Black Lives Matter, which is a fair sentiment, and you must be with these people.
There was no room for nuance. Right. No room for nuance. Right. It's A or B. Right. And I think the nuanced conversations I was trying to have were not trying to be heard. And it was only just met with more visceral, I told you Lecrae is a disaster. And so for me, it was like, I don't know. But
I told you that Lecrae is a wolf.
This is like,
this confirms it.
This confirms he's a wolf. And man, for me, bro, at that point in my time, I'm so fragile. I'm already like, I don't know what legs to stand on. Only thing I could think of at that point in time. So I went on a deep dive and I was trying to say, okay, who is God? Where is God? Because if these people who taught me the Bible can't see the error of what's happening in culture, what else are they wrong about?
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm like, and I kept running into this wall as I'm trying to research. I'm also triggered and traumatized by white men.
Mm-hmm.
So I just am like, every article I get is a white male. I was like, can a Hispanic male write an article? You know, can I get something else? And it was no.
Was the traumatization of white men based on those guys you looked at
Yes.
as heroes in the faith?
Yes.
And then they're kind of cold and callous
Yep.
to very real concerns.
I'll be candid and say, you heard me on Jesus Music talk about got a Johnny Mac in my backpack, talking about the John MacArthur Bible. And then we've heard some of the things that John MacArthur's had to say in terms of this, you know, and it's just like, yo, man, what are you may be really good at teaching the book of James, but as it pertains to what's happening in culture and society, I do not agree with you, sir. And so it was like, dag, I can't listen. Where do I go? And that was just one example, because there's some other men who were in my life and their pushback was crazy. You know what I'm saying? So I was just in a place of hurt, you know, to be called in a purveyor of ethnic Gnosticism by men that I have gone to see and ask for wisdom from was crazy to me. And so I was like, dang, y'all don't even see me as a human. Like, have a conversation with me. Like, man, Lecrae, I hear you're in pain, brother. Like, what is it about this murder that has you thinking this way? It wasn't that. It was just, bow.
What I heard a lot of was this idea that, you know, statistically, these don't happen that often. These situations don't happen that often.
Yeah.
There's only a handful of them that happen a year, but these are the stories that go viral.
Yeah.
And I would say that may be true. However, as someone that's like unapologetically pro-life, and I don't like, I am as pro-life as it gets.
As am I.
When it comes to third trimesters abortions, when it comes to really late abortion, those are very statistically low anomalies. But when someone says, I'm cool with abortion up until birth, we look at them like they're crazy. Not because there's a million of them happening a year. There aren't.
Right.
But they happen.
Right.
So my paradigm goes, what is it about your framework that you're okay with a baby that's beyond viable being terminated very late in a pregnancy, even though that's an anomaly, right? And in the same way that I would go, okay, why do you? This is clearly an overuse of force,
right?
In this situation. Say it only happens 50 times a year. That's still 50 times a year.
50 times too many.
It's crazy. And say it was someone that was on drugs. Say it was someone that was in an encounter with law enforcement. They shouldn't have even been encountered with law enforcement. Okay, let's just say all those things are true. That still shouldn't happen on a principle level. You know, and that's the part where like I felt like there were unjust scales in some of this. Having said that, and actually I remember seeing like a conversation with you and I think your name is Vodi. I remember that. And I remember like, oh, like how different that you guys were talking to each other. It was like a Zoom call. You were talking to each other. And I was like, this is cool. Like, and then all of a sudden, like, I don't know, it just seemed like the conversation stopped and the accusations revved up against you. But to be fair, was there ever a part where you felt like maybe you did kind of go a little too far into that? Meaning this, I do feel like there were people, and I don't know if this is you, but I do feel like there were people that came out of the reformed phase and there was a systematic order. And then as the CRT, whatever you want to call it, which isn't even real CRT. Like,
I know what you mean.
Like, but there was this white fragility, Robin DiAngelo, right? That like, I think filled that void of this like very system. White people are always implicitly racist towards black people. All white people. We're like, wait a minute, all white people? What do you mean by racist? And what do you mean by this, right? And so it almost filled the void of some of that same systematic thinking that many people got. And I think Cass just swapped it. Like some people went all the way in and to my opinion, and again, I'm not trying to be mean in this, but like did drink the Kool-Aid all the way where this sounds like Marxism, right? And I'll give you one example before you answer. I was having a conversation with a dear mutual friend of ours, and he brought up the idea of climate justice. And I said, you know, like we only emit like 15% of the world's emissions. And you know that like dirty energy is what's pulling developing nations out of poverty, India, parts of Africa. So climate justice is just there's like a jacking of a thing where like, and I'm a guy with a Tesla, solar panels, the whole thing, but this is language being hijacked to say things that's actually counterproductive to human flourishing. Right. And I feel like that's almost been unequivocally proven with the climate crisis, right? That like, even if America were to completely stop, the rest of the world is either going to starve or we got to go all the way green, and you don't want the world to starve. So we kind of got to build with it, right? So I didn't mean to open up the climate
I know
thing, but I'm just giving you an example where like some of this kind of went too far in some of this. So do you ever feel like there was a time in your processing of all this, coming out of Reformed theology, trying to find your words, that you did go too far in some of this new thinking of things? Yeah,
I think the thing I would say is that if anything is not led with a biblical worldview or framework, it has the risk of taking you somewhere you do not want to go, right? So if the plumb line is scripture and you get even an inch off of that line, you're going to be way farther the further down the line you go. So I think for me, I was pulling that thread and you know, when it started to veer off too far from scripture, I was like, this doesn't feel right, but I don't trust what I've known in the past. So for me, it's like, I don't know if scripture, because every time I read Romans, I hear the voice of somebody that has this visceral response to me. You know what I mean? So I couldn't tell if I went too far because I didn't know what too far was, right? Because the plumb line for me was always the Bible. Well, if the Bible is not my plumb line right now, I don't know what's too far, right? I know what feels too far, but I don't know because I don't really have a grasp on what I believe at this time. So I'm just going down the rabbit trails. And then I'm like, I don't really like that. I don't really like this. But I'm more like, I'm such a thinker that it's like I have to go to the furthest extent of it. So I can't, I'm like Nietzsche would say, like, if you're going to be a non-believer, be a all the way non-believer. Like you can't like borrow from a Christian worldview and be an atheist. You can't do that. That's inconsistent. So for me, it was like, I don't feel this is morally right to hate all white people. What are morals? What is right? What is wrong? You know, so it's this tension that I was wrestling with, and I didn't have a good answer. You know what I mean? I really didn't have a good answer. I just knew when I would read certain books, I'd be like, that just doesn't feel right. You know what I'm saying? But there would be points that I could agree with that I've seen. But on the flip side, I was like, I don't know where the standard is. So that was the hardest part for me, was not knowing where to land my plane.
Was there anything in particular that comes to mind that, like, maybe you said something publicly or a view you held that you're kind of like, oh man, I kind of went too in the same way that Calvinism went too far on a conservative hyper theology, systematic everything. Right. I kind of went too far on the left with some of the things you said or did.
I don't know if I could, if there's something I could pinpoint. I could tell you that the spirit of what I was saying may have not been healthy. Okay. You know what I mean? I don't know if because I was still like pretty manicured sometimes. I don't know if there's like anything I said that's like, you were pushing it, Cray. But the spirit behind some of the things I said was probably like, that's why you're saying this is not healthy. You know what I'm saying? Like I would know it, but I don't know if the public would know it. I was always skeptical on the Black Lives Matter organization. Always. I thought the sentiment was good. Like, they do matter. You know, it's a part of the human, you know, existence, part of God's creation, Imago Dei. Of course they matter. I wasn't ready to go to the extent that they were, you know? So it's kind of like Islam in some senses. Like you have the Sunni, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't really rock with them, but I rock with them. You know, like they would battle internally. So it's kind of like, yes, we all love Black people, but we disagree on how that love is manifested. And I just wasn't in a healthy enough space to like land my plane anywhere.
Yeah. In terms of your faith, what would you say like rock bottom was for your faith? And then did that materialize? Because I feel like you've talked about struggling with prescription pills and kind of going through some stuff. So what was that like rock bottom? Because it had to have been in the middle of the season.
Yeah. To be honest with you, rock bottom for me was consistent nights, drunkenness, pills, battling depression, anxiety, wondering if people can see me, wondering if fans are watching. And I kind of didn't care at one point in time. You know, I'm in the club. I'm just in the streets. You know, I'm just out here. So it's like, if you see me, hey, what's up? You know what I mean?
What window of time was this?
This is like 2017. 2017 to like close to the end of 18.
Mm-hmm.
This is the darkest period of my life. But it's also, my records are bigger than that. You know, Blessings is number one on the radio. I'll Find You's going crazy. And I just didn't care. You know, my DJ Official had died.
I remember that.
I just was like, I don't really care. I'm depressed. I'm sad. And I am like, you know, I'm on a radio run with some of the people from Colombia, and you know, they're taking me to clubs to do like listening parties, and you know, the weed's passing around. Why not? You know, who cares? Man, that's dope, man. You smoking weed and your song Blessings, like I'll rock with that. And it's like in my heart, I'm like, if there is a God, I am so not a good representative of him. You know what I'm saying? And rock bottom was, we were on tour, had a night of just way too much to drink. I'm seeing younger Christians like looking at me, and they just kind of following my lead. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, what am I doing? And then I woke up the next morning after ruminating on it all so long. The rumination turned into like a clinical depression. And now I'm just like, I'm stuck and I can't get out of it. And I don't know where to go. Like, where do I do? You know, so it's like the first thing I think of is I got to figure this out on my own. And then something just said, Ed Welch, who was a Christian counselor, biblical counselor. And I knew that name, and I just Googled the book that he wrote, started plowing through the book. And it was just like making me realize like, okay, you're playing with some dark stuff, brother. And you're in a dark place. And I was like, all right, God, if you're real, I'm ready. Like, if you're real, show up. And over a period of time, he started to just give me little things, you know, little moments. I'll never forget, I walked outside of my hotel room and I looked up, and it was a Jews for Jesus sign. And I just was like, I'm walking in that building. I just walk in the building. They were so kind and loving to me. And then this what got me more on like the ancient Near Eastern perspective of understanding the scriptures. That was like the impetus. And God was just kind, man. He just was like, hey, come here. There's way more than the worlds that you've been exposed to. And
Christianity is so much broader than what you've been exposed to.
Global faith.
Yeah.
Global faith. Yeah. And I went home, I opened up the scriptures, and I don't recommend people do this, right? This is like almost like trying to treat the Bible like a magic wand. But I just opened the Bible up and started reading, right? God was kind enough to give me a scripture that I was familiar with. And the scripture was when Peter had abandoned the Lord, and Jesus comes and he says, do you love me? He's like, you know, I love you. He's like, feed my sheep, you know? I just bawled. And I was like, God wants me to feed his sheep. And I am Peter. I've walked away. I've denied him. And he's telling me, I still love you and I still want you to feed my sheep. Rocked me to the core. And
what year was that?
That was 2018.
2018. Okay.
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah, I remember, I think we hung out, was it the beginning of 2018? We were together in some like random restaurant in New York.
Oh,
and you were like, yo, pull up. And I was there, and I remember hanging out with you, and you were like, oh, I was like, I think Lecrae's a little off. I don't think, you know?
Yeah, you were right.
I was like, oh. And then we sat down and we talked. I want to say that same year, we were at the Reach Studio, and we ended up sitting and talking for hours. And I remember you were sharing some of this with me, and you were just kind of telling, like, you seemed like you were slowly coming out of it. Like it was like you were coming out of this whole thing. You talked about how, like, you and your wife shut down doing any small groups at your house, stopped going to church, right? And you were like raw in the process of reconstructing everything. I think the place that it sounds like you land, and I've landed similar, is that Christianity is so much broader and more robust that I like the C.S. Lewis Mere Christianity approach. I have dear Catholic friends that I glean a lot of wisdom from. I got Orthodox friends that I glean a lot of, like, good friends. There's a reason why I'm not Catholic and Orthodox.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But I think that's so much broader, more robust. But I do think that there's an Orthodox framework of things we believe and then the ways we live.
Yep.
And I think once I've kind of seen that, like it's generally the same across all this, but we might disagree on the step of justification and how sanctification, where there might be some nuancing, but more or less 2,000 years of church history kind of all land around the same parameters of lifestyle, of orthopraxy or practice, and then also, theology and like these things. And that's been helpful to me. And it sounds like you kind of went through a similar process and landed in a place of like, I don't got all the answers. I'm not a Calvinist anymore, but all love to them. But I'm in this place of just like trying to follow Jesus.
If a Calvinist were to corner me, he'd probably be shocked. Like, wait, I believe in the doctrines of grace. Wait, what? Huh?
No.
But I thought if a Pentecostal were to corner me, they'd probably be shocked. Like, wait, what? You believe in the gifts of the Spirit? Like, and again, to me, it's like, my brother, I'm a biblicist. You know what I mean? What are you? I'm biblical.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. No, that's dope, man. So it's interesting to hear that whole sequence in reconstructing and reasserting your faith. Accusation or things that gets kind of hurled against you is this idea of like blending sacred and secular, right? And so I think of the verse in James 4:1, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, which I think we would all say yes and amen to that. And I know you've done a lot of philanthropy and are generous financially. But the second part to that, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world, right? So it's like there's a tension there of like care for the widow and the orphan. We see that in Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the talents into caring for the least of these. But then there's the tension of like, but don't get too polluted by the world, right? And so you mentioned the Big Crit feature, which I feel like the Big Crit feature to me, I don't know if I would probably say that I don't know if there's anything truly neutral, you know? But I think if you can get towards something that's neutral or at least not anti-Christian, anti-Christian messaging, it would be like a Big Crit type of moment, right? But then later on, the Ty Dolla $ign's record came out, and it was a beautiful record, the record Blessings, right? But there was some critique of like, hey man, like
his whole catalog
is just completely the antithesis of what you represent and what the God of the Bible calls us to live by, you know? And, you know, especially him going into this season with Ye, it's only revved up, unfortunately, you know? Though he's had some fire Christian songs with Ye on Jesus is King. So what do you do with that, like that critique of like, yes, we can collaborate with people that aren't Christian. I mean, when Solomon built the temple, he went and got the best craftsmen and got the best resources, and a lot of the resources and the people that designed it were not Christians themselves, right? But there's a difference in terms of like Dallas Jenkins and The Chosen having a non-Christian actor or a non-Christian camera guy versus like you are in what seems to be a partnership with the Ty Dolla $ign's. Song about God. Like how do you reconcile that? And has your views changed on that at all? And what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think that as it pertains to, well, one, I would agree with the scripture. Do not be polluted by the world, right? Like you don't want to create an environment where you're now compromising who you are and your faith in order to stand next to somebody who is living a completely opposite type of lifestyle. I think it really, for me, it depends on the way people are perceiving music and what they and how they see it, how it should be used, right? So where I'm at is when I listen to music, and it may be the era that I come from, but when I listen to music, what I'm listening to is someone's worldview. What I'm listening to is someone's story. What I'm listening to is them telling me how they see the world. And I want to engage that conversation. I want to say, okay, well, let's have a conversation about how you see the world. And when I collaborate with artists who don't share my worldview, the first thing I say is, I don't want you to talk about what I believe, because that's disingenuous to who you are. I want to do something where we're talking about what you believe, and either A, we're both like having a conversation about what you believe and what I believe, which is what happened with Crit, right? Or we're talking about something that we both can say, hey, this is where I stand on this. And this is where I stand on this, like, fatherhood. Like, okay, let's talk, like, me and Fonte from, Little Brother have had conversations about doing some music, right? I'm not going to get on the record with Fonte and talk about how good God is, because I don't know what he believes about God and if God is good. I will do a song with Fonte about what it's like to be an adult and managing family and music, right? Because that's us having a conversation over a music bed about this reality. I'm not here to highlight his worldview about God. I'm here to have a conversation with somebody that I'm like, hey, this is a good perspective on marriage or raising a family and working. So it can get blurry, and I'm okay with people disagreeing, because for me, that's how I'm seeing it. And I don't know if there's as far as my study has been concerned, I'm not convinced there's this is the line. This is the right thing and wrong thing. I don't think it's as much of a right and wrong as it is a wise or unwise. That's how I look at it. Yeah. Is this wise or is this unwise? If a woman is being cheated on by her husband and she's like asking her pastor, should I get divorced? There's some people who will say yes. There's some people who will say maybe. The question comes down to her. Is this wise to stay with him or unwise? Is this the character that he's always exemplified? Do you feel like this is going to be a repetitive thing? Is he repentant? Is he putting himself in a place where he wants to grow and be different moving forward? What are the circumstances here? Because I can't tell you, if I was your pastor, I wouldn't say absolutely leave him, and I wouldn't say absolutely stay with him. I would say, do you think this is a wise decision or an unwise decision? Sure. And that's how I approach the features. Yeah. To me, it's not a right or wrong. It's not should I do this collaboration or should I not?
But is there a line for you personally?
Absolutely.
Okay, so where is that line personally where you go, all right, I love this dude. I'll pour into him behind the scenes. We can have a relationship, but like, I am not going to platform him, or I am not going to leverage my influence so they see the influence, because if my audience clicks into this artist and goes down a rabbit hole of what they're into, now I'm not being a good steward. Like, where is that line for Lecrae?
Yeah, I think the line for me is always changing as I mature, as I grow, as I process different things, right? The line for me is probably like, is this person known for an anti-Christian worldview? Is that what they are known for? If as soon as I say their name, Lil Uzi Vert, which is Lucifer, you know what I'm saying? As soon as I say their name, do you immediately think, sheesh? No, I'm not doing it, because for me, that's too far. You know what I'm saying? For me, that feels disingenuous, because now it's like, well, why am I doing that? Why can't I just have a conversation with this guy and build that way? Why do we have to do a record together? But I've had conversations behind the scenes with Jack Harlow. I've seen him process and think. He's a thinker. I understand what it's like to reach heights unknown, and then you start compromising your views on things and so on and so forth. So I'm like, well, Jack, where are you at, like, in this journey? Because I've heard you talk about some potent things, and I've heard you talk about some very anti-biblical things. That would be one where I'd be like, I don't know if this is wise or unwise. You know what I'm saying? Corday, it's like, man, I think you are a thinker and a processor. I think we can build a relationship. I think you would listen to me if I had a conversation with you about our faith. I think we'd be in the studio dialoguing, and we're going to come to some neutral territory about what we want to talk about. And I don't feel like it would be a situation where it's like, oh, I'm leading somebody down a bad.
So you're not doing a record with Sexy Red.
Not gonna do. Nah, that's not for
Ice
me.
Spice is out.
It's ice. Nah, that's where I'm at today. You know what I'm saying? That's just like, nah, this is too. You're too much of this. And I can't. I'm not gonna be able to do that.
Yeah. I think it's a definitely good to hear you say, like, there are hard cutoffs.
Yeah.
And then there are people that you're trying to find, and I would say it almost sounds like you're trying to find that common grace and goodness of God that people can hear, experience, see in the world, even if they don't know God.
Absolutely.
You know, and if you could find art, or if you can make art around those concepts,
absolutely,
I think it's good. I think the tricky part is, though, there is so much that is from a worldview standpoint that's just within the broader culture, not just hip hop, but just the broader culture that is the antithesis of the gospel. Not maybe on a surface level, but when you get to that layer of belief, you know, and you go, wait a minute, like this is crazy. Like what is being championed and celebrated is stuff that, like, you know.
And man, in a year from now, my vantage point on that could be completely different. And I could be like, I don't think I should do that at all. You know what I mean? Like, that could be the case. I have not, like, my views on that. And that's the thing, as human beings, like, everyone gets the chance to evolve off camera. I evolve in front of the world. Public.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I am growing and being sanctified every day. It's just that you're watching it in real time. And it's like, hey man, you know, what you hate me for today, you know, I maybe something that I haven't grown through.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure. We talked about, like, not being polluted by the world. There was a back and forth spat kind of about that between you and our mutual friend D1 over the, what is it? Ratchet and Righteous and Kendrick and Corinthians. Shirts.
Yes.
And we had this conversation, and it sounded like there was some common ground. He pushed back about those statements and how those are not, you know, and I've heard you say similar stuff, like, I think you said something like, my wife is a housemaker, but a city girl or something like that. What is it, a church girl and a city girl or something like that, right? And so you kind of do this thing where you have wordplay, righteous and ratchet, and so, you know, his pushback was very specific, like, hey, these are incompatible ideas. Now, I'm not going to be the etymologist on the word ratchet or whatever, but, you know, some of these things do tend to have a not just a secular, but a negative connotation, right? So when I think of city girls, I don't think like, oh yeah, like my wife is independent and she's a Proverbs 31 woman, and she's like I think like, oh, like she's out here in the streets. You know what I mean? That, I know that's not how you mean it. Like, I know you're not saying ratchet and that, but it does come to the question of, like, are we then taking worldly terms? I hate that word, by the way. Well, we're taking these terms and then trying to, like, Christianize them to make them fit within our paradigm, versus saying, like, no, they can have that. Like, we got the God of the universe. We don't even need to take these things. Do you think these critique was valid? I
gave him credence on the critique, and I apologize, and I took that Cardi and Corinthians shirt.
Cardi and Corinthians, that's what it was.
I took that off of my joint, and I was like, I can see what you're saying on that. I'm not above reproach. I'm not above a challenge. I think the heart behind what I was trying to do is just have common ground with people. And to me, you know, I just know, I think some of us, I know more than anything, I'm a missionary, right? More than anything, I am tilling hard soil, finding common ground, spending time with people. The people I've seen converted to Christ have come through consistent investment. It's like telling somebody the way you've been living for the last 20 years is crazy. Follow Jesus. That's a rarity. You know what I'm saying? What generally happens is seeds get planted that make them say, dag, wait a minute. Oh my God. You know what I mean? And that's what I've seen more consistently. So for me, it's always just like, man, that ain't nothing to me but like a chicken dinner for somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to have a chicken dinner with you to create some inroads so that you can come into my house and we can spend more time together and you can listen to the full catalog. And that's really the heartbeat behind it. It's not to try to like, I need to be accepted by the world. You know what I mean? It's always the motive. And so for me, it was like, ratchet to me just means like, I get offended a little bit because, or not offended, I feel out of place because I wasn't raised in a Christian home. So I came into this thing with the tattoos and the fitteds and the clothing, and it's like, this is who I am. And I'm learning I don't have to get rid of this to love Jesus. So I want people to feel like, oh, like if you spend time with my wife, she's kind of hood. You know what I'm saying? She gonna roll her neck and what you talk, And to me, I'm like, that's ratchet, that's ghetto. But for D, he's like, no, ratchet is specific to this. And I'm like, okay, well, different interpretation of what it is. I just don't want us to feel like we can't be our authentic selves and still be compatible with, or not compatible, because none of us are compatible with Jesus, but still be used by God. You know what I'm saying? So my whole career has been off the back of me being a product of hip hop, which people demonize and say that's of the world. And it wasn't like I was trying to like separate myself from hip hop and be like, well, we're going to do something different. No, I'm saying that we're going to use hip hop in such a way to demonstrate God's glory through it. And that's all I was trying to do is say like, listen, this is who we are. And yeah, I mean, I may have overstepped my bounds.
You ended up taking down you ended up, the shirt came out and then it came down. That's what happened, right? But that was planned ahead of time.
It was.
Yeah, and I was trying to tell him that because I was like, hey, like, I don't think Lecrae had this back and forth with you and then was like,
oh, I got him.
I'm going to drop some shirts 2 days after. I was like, I'm pretty sure they're not drop shipping these shirts.
No.
And I think this was in the pipeline.
Yes.
And it was probably already made.
Yes.
And they couldn't just cancel it at the time. But then you still did that. And I'm assuming that came with a financial L as well.
Took an L. You know, I had to eat the cost. It just was what it was. It's like I ate the cost because I was like, all right, I can see where he's coming from. And I don't ever, I'm like, again, it's like, oh, well, the money ain't worth, you know, creating a problem for believers.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. And I think one of the false things that people say about you is like assuming that at this phase in your life, you're motivated by money or clout and that making things that's quote unquote more targeted towards a general market is more financially beneficial for you.
No.
And it's not.
Yeah, no.
Right? Like you do as a Christian rapper or a Christian artist, you're gonna do way better in those worlds and those spheres than you are playing Summer Jam or opening up for Jill Scott.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think that's a false, like unfair thing that I'm because I understand the math and I understand that soft ticket versus hard ticket sales, church budgets, conference budgets, and that's not a reality. But that is something that like people will be like, oh, it's like because he wants the approval of the world or because it's about the bag. And I'm just like, Lecrae been rich for a minute. Lecrae's been doing very well for a minute for himself, you know, and I don't think he's doing any of what you're doing in the last couple of years for money.
No,
you know,
no, actually, it's the opposite. You know, now these days, I read this book. Now I'm gonna tell you the name of the book because my memory is getting cloudy. Phenomenal book though that was really so helpful for me. That my guy, From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks, and it talks about in your youth you use this like passionate energy and you're just going and getting and accomplishing and killing it. And as you get older, that doesn't work for you. You don't have that anymore. And a lot of older people are still trying to recapture that my 25-year-old phase of like, I'm gonna go kill this thing and they can't hold me back. And look what Vera Wang did at 40 and And what he's saying is when you look at Mozart or you look at some of these amazing people, they leaned on a different strength as they got older. And that strength was experience. And so what I have that John Keith doesn't have is experience. John Keith can lean into being the most efficient rapper in existence right now. And he can just bar up and write 1 million songs and kill it. And that's going to be his contribution in this season of his life. Lecrae's contribution in this season of his life is how can I give experience to John Keith or anyone else like that to help push this thing forward. That's really what gives me a kick, is like giving out the wisdom and experience that I've garnered. I made enough. I'm good. Like, I just want to create an inheritance for my children's children and help these other artists and these other young people thrive.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job on the entrepreneur tip. And so the funny thing to me is like, even when there was like these accusations of like Marxist and all this stuff, and I'm like,
I'm definitely a Christian capitalist.
Yeah, I was like, I know Lecrae and I know Ben, and they're as capitalistic as you can get. They run a real business with real employees, and they support private property rights and
for sure.
all those things. And I say that to say because I've seen people go off all the way on the like. I had an argument with someone that like was like, "Nah, the Bible doesn't presuppose private property rights," and I was like, what? Like one of the Big 10 is like, do not steal. That presupposes that
somebody has private property.
So that's dope, man. I think the experience part is super fire, and I think the wisdom that you're in, and I felt like I've always wanted to see you lean more into the acumen, the business acumen, the entrepreneurship, the what you've been able to build on the reach end, because I think you have a lot of experience and a lot of practical wisdom you can give. That is, I was with the Maverick City guys yesterday, and they were talking about how there's not a lot of representation of Black entrepreneurs to give people context that like you can be an executive, you can do these other things, and you don't have to just be the talent. And it's been dope to see that. And so do you see yourself kind of leaning more into sharing those aspects?
Heavy. I just did Invest Fest, and I was shocked at how big the crowd started getting, because what I was saying was very contrary to everything else. What I was articulating is that abundance does not equate independence. As a matter of fact, abundance means being more dependent, more dependent on God, more dependent on other people. Because oftentimes people garner a lot of financial, they're more well off, and then they try to get away from people. They move to a big house away from everybody else. They want to deal with people, and that's really to their detriment. You know what I mean? So, but the crowd got larger and larger as I started articulating these particular things and just giving a different vantage point on it. I just talked to the guys from Earn Your Leisure, and I just want to give people more insight. I think in the church community, it's tougher sometimes because we have this weird relationship with money. You know what I'm saying? And so
there's people that have a worldview that presupposes that big is bad. And that righteous is gone when someone becomes rich. And all these different things. And it's a lot of really, I call it this, I think I've said this before, but I think there's concerns about like Christian nationalism, and that's not my concern. Isn't that my deeper concern is Christian nihilism? I think there's a Christian nihilism that is permeating Christian culture, and this despair and this hopelessness, and so then when they see Lecrae, and Lecrae is in shape, looking good, moving around, influence, power, they go, oh, he must have sold his soul to the devil. It's like, wait a minute. So there's a Christian nihilism that I think you're speaking out against, but you're right. There are people that presuppose that like they don't want you to have nothing. And if you have anything, then you've sold your soul.
Well, I was there. If you listen to Rebel, I'd rather have $1 in my pocket than $1 million.
Yeah,
it's like, why? Yeah. Why would you rather have $1 than $1 million, Lecrae? And at that point in time, I was like, because I'm scared of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, it's a tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the devil.
And I feel like there's a scriptural precedent for those of us who have it are to do more with it. We're to give it away. We're to help people. And so like there's the joy of being able to create economic stability for close family members that have never had it.
Oh my gosh.
You can't explain that or quantify how that is. And then to go beyond sometimes just family and be able to help out that single mother or to be able to help out that person that's in a financial bind. Not as a way to enable them, but as a way of like, hey, like you didn't see this expense coming, but like we got you.
Yep.
You know, there's nothing that, and I think people, again, going back to Matthew 25, like Christian nihilism, the world's coming to an end, world's, going to burn, it's all bad. And then you read Matthew 25, which is coming out of Jesus talking about the last days in Matthew 24, Matthew 25, the wise and the foolish virgins, right? Living as if Jesus is going to come back, into the parable of the talents, into caring for the least of these.
Yep.
So you got to have to be able to give. You got to you got to manage in order to be able to be generous.
Yep.
And so I think that's really, really fire. Financial wisdom you would give the younger generations. What would you impart? I know you have these conversations offline with a lot of these rappers. They're getting their first little check. They're starting to see their first money come in, show money come in.
Right.
What kind of wisdom are you giving them in terms of generosity, giving, budgeting, planning, investing?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a large part of it is I look at the simplest way I would articulate it is like create a table. A table has 4 legs, right? What are your 4 legs? You should have a giving leg, right? Because God has entrusted you with something and you want to make sure that you're trusting him and being a good steward by showing that this money is from you to do your will, your work. You want to have a investing leg, right? You need a leg that helps you learn how to grow what God has given you. The parable of the talents, right? It's like God gave them something to invest, and when they did a good job with it, he said, okay, well done. You want to have a savings leg, right? So to save money for things that may come up.
Emergency fund.
Exactly, right? You never know what's going to happen. And then you want to have your expense leg, right? So there's just different expenses that are going to come out for various different things. And if you're not thinking about it in that way, then you're going to always be pulling in your savings to take care of expenses, right? So you got spending, giving, investing, and spending, or investing and saving. Yeah. And that's just simple. That's the basics that I tell my artists. I took one of my artists and like, hey, we're going to set you up a checking account. Also, you don't have a DBA. You're writing checks from your personal account to pay for business expenses. Like, we got to at least get that set up. I want you to have an LLC, but we're going to start, here first. And just little things along those lines that just help them get a better grasp on the bare minimum. So I'm always trying to, I'm very transparent as well. So I had a business manager come in and break down how this all works and what their money looks like and where they're getting money from and royalties. We're super transparent. We've gotten in trouble for our transparency, honestly, because people leave here, go to another label or something, and then the label's like, hey, stop telling them all this information because we're not going to tell them that stuff. So, but yeah, man, I there's so much I could say is in regard to that, but if you don't have that giving leg, I don't give to get. But there is a principle of, why do you expect God to trust you with anything more if you can't trust him?
There's a supernatural math to it that don't make sense.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Good. Being broke made me rich.
Being broke made me rich, baby.
Jackie Hill Perry.
Yeah.
Announcement with Reach Records.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think
her project is sounding fire.
Yeah. When is that coming? Because I think a lot of people are asking about that. First of all, I just want to give you props for that's a great partnership. She's awesome. Preston is awesome. What they're doing is incredible. And I think that's a great, I wasn't expecting that from Reach, because you guys have been doing a great job of finding talent, cultivating, and then boom, Hovey's massive and big and, doing. So you guys have kind of been doing that for a couple years, but that's a legacy act, that's a legacy act. And she could probably benefit from the infrastructure musically that you guys are providing as a label. So when is that coming, and how did that deal come about? Yeah. And then what else is coming from Reach?
Jackie's project will be out, this year. She's got a few things in the pipeline. She, first draft, and then she'll give you guys like kind of a little bit of a buffet of some of the new music, and then she'll have a more refined project even after that. So just warming that market back up and getting people used to her as a rapper again is really kind of what she's doing right now. I gotta, shout out to Jackie for trusting us, right? Because it wasn't like, she needed Reach. She could have took her talents everywhere.
Did she initiate that, or did y'all initiate that?
So what's crazy is that so Ace, our head of A&R, goes to church with Jackie.
Okay, shout out to Ace.
And so Jackie saw Ace working in the nursery, and she was like, you guys really live this. You know what I'm saying? So then they started having a conversation, and she was talking about doing music, and he was like, yo, we can. And she was like, I'm gonna come up there. And she came up, and then she was just like, I'm gonna do it. And it was like, yo, Jackie's gonna sign. And we were like, are you serious? Let's go. You know what I mean? Let's make it happen. So it was really that simple. It was like her just peeping, like, are we really as genuine on the outside, like as the outside portrays on the inside? And when she saw that was enough comfort for her to trust us with her work. Yeah. So
shout out to Ace, man. Serving with the babies. I was doing that last summer. I had the 1 to 3 year olds, and it was so fun. I love babies, bro. So shout out to Ace, really living it and closing deals.
Closing deals in the nursery.
In the nursery. Wow. Okay, so when is that coming out? I saw this thing. You guys put out one single, right?
Yeah, first draft dropped. I don't think we have a specific date yet, but
there's just gonna be some singles come out.
40 years over with. No, she'll drop a whole album, whole project. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Maybe an EP. Before the year's over with.
Okay, before the year's over with.
Yeah, but music is fire.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Music is fire. She's in her bag, man. I'm just like, God.
Okay. Anything else coming from Reach we need to know about?
Everybody's cooking. Hovey's album is about to drop. Cry. Limo's dropped his album. Young Chosen. Anike's dropped her album, self-titled Anike. I'm working on music. My single comes at the end of the month. Lift Me Up, which actually we not stole, but it was made for Kanye when he was doing his Jesus is King project. And they were like, he's not on this anymore. So the hook was already written. It was a song that was crafted for that era of his life. And
you guys submitted that to him, or they brought that? Someone brought that to
So Beam, Beam, Ty Shane, Papa Sam's son, whatever, however you want to look at him, he crafted it for Ye. And I think for Beam too, it was like he was excited because he wants to move and tap into his dad's legacy and be more on
his Christian roots.
Yeah. So it didn't pan out, and he was like, I don't know anybody else who could do this but you. And I was like, word. I listened to it. I said, goodness gracious, this is phenomenal. And he's like, I got a bunch of them.
What do you make of where Kanye's at now, man? I attended quite a few of those Sunday services. Hey, we're gonna go to the Patreon only extended version of this conversation. It's a little too much for YouTube. So if you want to hear me and Lecrae continue this conversation, consider signing up for a free 7-day trial where you could see the entire conversation and get access to all of our future podcasts, be able to interact with our guests, and much more. Here's a little preview of what's available on Patreon. I'll see you over there. What do you make of where Kanye's at now, man? I attended quite a few of those Sunday services. He's addicted to nitrous right now, and this is his...
I have family members who are same-sex attracted, and in my interaction with them, the first thing I want to know is, obviously, if there's a woman and it's like, it's your life or the baby's life, I'm for that rally that I was at. I asked, was it bipartisan? I asked, they said, yes, it is. It's bipartisan. And when I got there...
What do you make of someone that takes the position and goes, man, Lecrae, you've been a bit ambiguous on some of these things?
Ruslan,